Amy to Women in Tech. Thank you.
There we go. How's that? Oh, yes, I can tell it's working. All right, terrific. Thank you so much, Serpil, for your warm welcome. And again, Wendy Jennings, thank you for asking me to be here. This is not going to be a technical session today. Thank you. You'll thank me later for that. But I would like to have a little bit of fun, and my goal for all of you is to be able to recognize either yourself, one of your coworkers, someone that you know, to be able to create a little bit of a better relationship with them. But we're going to do that by talking about generations, because the way that we behave and the things we do are really greatly influenced by that. In particular, the two things that we will focus on is how those generational experiences influence us as women in the workplace and our very convoluted relationship with money. So today we're going to cover what generations are. I need to give you a little bit of context here. And I'll say that I know not everyone in our office or in the audience today was raised in the United States. That's okay, because you work in the United States, so you're going to recognize other people in some of these characteristics as well. By the time we are done together today, I'd like you to understand how these generational influences make us act and relate a certain way at work, with money, and then hopefully you'll have some very specific generational tips that you can act on when you go home that will help you create better relationships in your life, at work, and also to help you start creating better financial futures for you and for your families. Very, very easy. Now, I'm sure everybody has had some kind of leadership training where you start to identify people and then how you should react to them, right? The Clifton Strengths Finder by Gallup is one of my favorites. It's also very detailed. And someone that has a specific strength that was born in 1920, and someone that has that very same strength that's born in 1995, it will be expressed very differently. And it's because of generations. So you might ask, why do we care? How is this connected? I don't get it. There is a survey that's done every year by the American Psychological Association. It's called Stress in America. Year after year, stress in America. Yes. Year after year, the top two causes of stress are money and work, only followed by health, family issues, and violent crime. There we go, violent crime. Thankfully, violent crime is not number one, but we're in interesting company here. So if we can reduce our stress from money, create a little more financial wellness and understand what that means, and also have better relationships at work and communicate more clearly, understand what drives people, understand ourselves and how we react to certain things, we can significantly reduce that stress. And if you still don't fully believe what I'm going to say here, what are the two biggest things in the last 100, 120 years that have affected women? Biggest massive cultural change. The first is our relationship and responsibility with money and wealth. And what's the number one cause of stress in the US? Money. What's the second biggest change for women? Work. What's the second biggest cause of stress? Work. Women are at the heart of it all. All right, so now that we understand that, let's talk about generations. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because most people know what a generation is, but there are some layers here that are important for you to understand. The first is birth years. That's a given. People from a generation are grouped together because of the years that they were born. And during those very specific years, they have experiences that form their personalities, how they interact with the world. That creates a set of values. And that set of values is the characteristics that distinguish one generation from the other. And those values and experiences and the time that they were born together gives them a cultural literacy that helps them identify each other and helps you identify who they are and what generation they belong to. Make sense? All right. Terrific. During your generational years, every generation is going to have formative events and significant events. Formative events are 0 to about 12. This is when a lot of human development is taking place. You're just reacting to the world and figuring out the structure. But when you get to about 12 or 13, you start to have really significant events. You have them throughout later in your life. But this is the time where you identify yourself as an individual in the world, and you start proactively engaging in those events. It's not just happening to you as a child. These are things you start to form opinions on, and you start actually interacting. And experiences have layers. In case you couldn't tell, I do get pretty excited about the animations and slides, so bear with me. So experiences have two different layers. There's internal and there's external. Internal are things that are inherent to you, the four walls of the home you grow up in, and something that might have been specific to you, like an illness as a child. It's happening during a generation, but it's only really happening to you. It is not common or shared. And then there's external. And the external factors are things where any parent notices this. You drop your darling, perfect child off at preschool for the first time, and 3 hours later you pick them up and a monster gets in the car. What happened? It's external forces. There are external experiencing that other people and regional events and global events, these are things that are going to shape your personality. And that's what creates your core formative experiences. They're things that you believe for the rest of your life, set in stone, about your future, about people, about your purpose and your mission in life, and your very cornerstone beliefs. And then you start to get into your teen years, and things get interesting in your teen years anyway, but then you start having significant experiences, and it layers on top of those foundational experiences and makes you question them. You meet even more people. You go off to college. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not. You get exposed to activities and experiences that might make you question what's important, what's real, what's not, specifically with beliefs, right? These are the layers of experiences every generation will go through, and it really shapes how they interact in the world. Now today, we are going to talk mostly about working generations, but we will go through them all. Again, here's my animations. We're going to focus on the baby boomers, Gen X, and the millennials, because that's who the working generations are in the US today. But we will talk about the greatest generation and the silents, because they have huge influences on us, especially as women, even today. So we need to talk about those things. All right, this is the experience cycle. I want you to recognize as I go through this, I will talk about one generation and the other and how they interacted through these experiences, because significant experiences become, at the same time, formative experiences for that generation. What you are experiencing right now are formative experiences. But your children, who are below the ages of 13, the same exact things that they are hearing on the news, those are formative experiences for them. Understand the cycle? Everybody goes through it. And every generation, it's one of the reasons why we start to see repeating patterns. And then we all know about generation gap. And this is when we think our children are crazy and the world is going you-know-where in a handbasket. And it's because things change. But if you look time and time again, one generation will raise the next, and then the next. But generations are getting a little bit shorter, mostly because of technology. So the greatest generation raised the silents. For the most part, the silents raised the boomers. But then we get to Gen X, and I'm a proud member of Gen X. Gen X is raising Gen Z. Why? Because we're having babies later, and we're working. Exciting stuff. Millennials are raising a generation we haven't even identified yet. They're here, but we don't have a name for them. Maybe we should make one up today. That would be fun. All right, let's start with the greatest generation. So this generation started at the turn of the century. Their birth years were right after the beginning of the 1900s. They are all over 91. There are not that many of them left. And their core values are honor and sacrifice and duty and religion and family and hierarchy. At work, it's organizational structure and I am the boss. Primarily men. Primarily. But some really interesting stuff starts to happen in their formative years. Who knew that Teddy Roosevelt was inaugurated because another president was assassinated? Did you know that? I mean, these are tumultuous times. It's the first impression, formative events for this generation. This is the generation that saw man take flight. It saw major advances in technology with the telephone. It saw the greatest city on the West Coast be burned to ash in hours. It saw the income tax law, and we start to not trust the government. Don't want to say that too loud. And then the U.S. enters World War I and Prohibition begins. These are tough times, really tough times. But in 1920, women earned the right to vote. Think about that. Almost an entire generation where nearly all of the members who are female did not have a say. They did not have a voice. Here's how this shows up at work today. How many of you have sat in a meeting and said, well, excuse me, I'm sorry, but I think we should do X, and nobody says a word. And then 2 minutes later, a man says, oh, we should do X. And it's like he invented bread. Who has had this experience? Yes, do you know why? Because when women got the right to vote, it wasn't a super popular thing. And so they apologized for it. And we are still doing it, ladies. We are still apologizing for having a voice. So my first request of you is to not apologize for yourself at work, because nobody will listen to you, especially with men. Have you ever heard a man apologize for his opinion? Ever? No. Why would they? So if you're sitting in a room full of men and you say, I'm sorry, but I think we should do this, all they heard was, I'm sorry and I'm not important, and you really shouldn't pay attention to anything I have to say. And then they come up with your idea, and you're like, wait, am I crazy? I think I just said that. What is happening? That's why this generation is so important to us. There's another reason that they're very important from a family structure perspective. These were multi-generational families, first-generation Americans, and just when their parents, who had been immigrants, came to retire, the Depression happened, significant event for this generation. And they moved in with their kids because they had to. They lost everything. That has a significant effect on the next generation, both formative and significant. So it was a really big deal. They had some really interesting ways of spreading news and propaganda. One of them was they had movies with sound. That was new. They had Yankee Stadium. We had Reader's Digest and Time Magazine being published coast to coast, the first time you could read the same news on both coasts. Really big advances here. And in their significant years, these are the women that went to work in the factories in World War II. Most of them grew up without voting. How do you think that shows up at work? I'm sorry, can I have the wrench? And then World War II ends and they had to go back home. Now, we'll talk about that later. All right, so the greatest generation then has the silent generation. Their birth years, 1929, 1945, they're currently 74, 92. Current population about 8%, and their values very much similar to their parents. And the reasons are, this is multi-generational households. Children in their formative years spent a lot of time with grandparents that had the same values. So they had more and more of that influence than their parents had had. It was like a double dose of honor and duty and sacrifice and serious things. You know these people, you know. These are my parents. Love them. By the way, my parents are watching. My parents are watching, which is why I dressed up today, because I know better than to come to the tech campuses and be dressed up, but I will hear about it from my mother if she thinks that I look too casual, so that's why they're my parents. Thank you. So very, very early on in the greatest generation, we have the Great Depression. This makes a big formative experience. These are significant experiences for the greatest generation. And we had the Star-Spangled Banner written in 1931. No wonder they're so patriotic. You go through something like the Great Depression, and your parents are very secretive about money. The parents of the silent generation were the mattress savers. It was the, don't put all your eggs in one basket. They didn't trust the banks. Well, FDR came along and said, we are raising an entire generation of people that don't trust the government because their parents are telling them not to. We got to do some really good stuff to make sure that they do, and that when they grow up, they will put their money in banks, or this country is going nowhere. So they create the New Deal. They invest in the country. They start building roads. They create Social Security so you can retire and not move in with your kids. We have the first peacetime draft. They're very patriotic. They line up in droves. And then the U.S. enters World War II in 1941 with Pearl Harbor. Their mothers go off to work in the factories, Rosie the Riveter. And there's this undercurrent of, we need you, but the only reason you're there is because the boys are at war. And as soon as the men came back from war, the women were expected to put all of that experience, all of those new opportunities, all of that training back in their pocket, all the responsibilities for finance and money, more than just the grocery budget. They were expected to put that away and look perfect, have a martini in their hand. And their husband came home. And you see this reflected in TV. You absolutely see this reflected in television. Norman Rockwell-esque. It's the time where in their significant years we are expanding out in the West. We start building suburbia. It's exciting times, 2 cars in every garage. Limited opportunities for women at work. But their mothers had told them, you can do more. There are more possibilities. You don't have to just be married and have children to have a successful life. You can do more, because their mothers had tasted that during World War II. But there were no opportunities for them to take advantage of it, because society wasn't ready for that yet. So when it comes to money, this generation is quiet, silent, quiet. They grew up, formative years, Great Depression, parents told them, don't trust the banks, stuff your money away, have cash. It's not what they did. And the reason that they didn't do that is this is the first generation to have real access to investing, and I'll come back to that. But from a money perspective, they valued pensions. They were still available and very common. And Social Security was new. They were going to be able to retire. These are exciting times, super exciting times. And then we come to the baby boomers. Men go away to war, no babies. Men come back from war, lots of babies. Lots of babies. Woo, man, biggest generation the U.S. had ever seen. Yeah, fun times. And the economy boomed. We built houses, we built suburbia, we were investing in the country. It's a great time of economic power. I mean, party on, life was good. And they had lots of freedom. Now remember, their mothers are late greatest generation and very early boomers, or very early silents. Mothers have already been telling for 2 generations now, you can do more. You can have a job. You don't have to just be a waitress or a telegraph operator or a secretary. You can do more. Make it happen. But the opportunities are still relatively limited as the baby boomers start to grow up and move into that era. So we will see the silent generation, significant events, formative for the baby boomers. We go back to war, lots of civil unrest. You can at least watch it on TV. 1954, we got the McCarthy hearings. This is actually how the silent generation got their name. Because you shouldn't talk. You might be a communist. You should be quiet. We're blasting off into space. We have the nuclear arms race, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Berlin Wall goes up. And the world is divided in good and bad. We have enemies again, and we know who they are. 1963, JFK is assassinated. Big, big turn in the hope and freedom and consensus and, I'll have a good cause. That's what the baby boomers grew up with in their formative years. Their late silent generation parents are the ones that you see in all the hippie clothes. Not the early ones, the late ones. Because they're coming of age in the age of Aquarius. And it's groovy, man, and that's their formative experience. How do you think this shows up at work? Where are my boomers? Come on, show me. Any baby boomers in the audience? No? First time ever. Oh, I have one. Eternal optimist. Eternal optimist. You should have a cause. This is the second generation. The entirety of the generation is women have the right to vote. You have a voice. You should use it. You should get out there. And if you see pictures from the 60s, you will see women, and they are right in the front, right in the front. Their mothers didn't do that. And the opportunities from a work perspective aren't completely there. One of the main reasons is because the Vietnam War begins, and the men go off to war again. Baby boomers' family structure, very, very low divorce rates, very low divorce rates. Smaller distributed families, we're starting to get into the 60s. What do you think these young women as children are seeing in their formative years and then their significant years, how women are being portrayed on TV? It was Beaver Cleaver and I Love Lucy. And in the 60s, you started to see women portrayed in primary roles where they had one identity that they weren't allowed to show the rest of the world. I Dream of Jeannie, awesome outfit. Nobody knew she lived in a bottle. She wasn't allowed to tell anybody that. Bewitched, Gilligan's Island. Women who are forced to live one way, but really want to live another. You start to see it coming out. And they seem like subliminal messages, but they're very loud and clear, especially to the young women who are forming their opinions at this time. Women in the labor force is increasing, and we find really unique ways to participate in the economy with things like work at home. Rodan and Fields right now, one of the best. We've all heard of that, right? But it started with things like Tupperware and Mary Kay. It was a way for them to still be the perfect wife, but to participate in the labor force. It was important. It was really important. From a financial perspective, boomers, impulsive, this is the generation that is never going to get old, man. It's awesome forever. And generally speaking, as a group, they are not very well prepared for retirement. It's also very popular amongst baby boomers, and my parents are going to call me as soon as this is over and say, send us a check, because this generation highly believed in paying for college for their children. It was very, very popular. Altruistic, and I certainly benefited from that. However, there's no loan for retirement, and there's lots and lots of ways to borrow money to go to school. So this generation, they still value pensions, emerging 401k plans, and they very much believe that they will have Social Security. It's a big difference from a money perspective. Gen X, where's my Gen X? All right. Now Gen X, we are interesting. We are a smaller generation than the boomers. Our parents have no idea what to do with us. I'm convinced that they called us Gen X because they were like, we don't know what to call them. We have no idea how to describe these people. We are realists. We are autonomous. There are lots and lots of diversity and inclusion events that happen very early in our formative years that make diversity important to us. We are a little bit selfish and independent. And there's some really good reasons for that. Very early on, in our very early formative years with Gen X, we have some historic diversity and inclusion events. In 1966, the state of Massachusetts, for the first time in 85 years, elects an African-American congressman. And just a year later, Thurgood Marshall, sworn into the Supreme Court. These are awesome, awesome advances for our society. Ethnic diversity is on the rise. There's still social unrest, but we are making progress. And then we get in our own way. Martin Luther King is assassinated just the following year. People from Gen X are characterized by, why? Why bother? And the reason is, we saw our baby boomer predecessors and the late parts of our parents' generation go out and do all of this work and make all of this change and sacrifice their lives and march. And it's amazing stuff, and they absolutely should have done it because we deserve that as a society. And then we get in our own way. So it's not that we don't think things are important. We just want it done. Can we just do it? Geez, do we have to go through all of this trouble? We did. And part of that is we didn't actually do it. Our parents did. It's formative experience. We are children. But our impressions by so many things that happened during our generation is that that looks like a lot of work. Can't we just all agree that this is what should happen? Can't we all agree that we should have acceptance and equality? Do we have to do all of this? Because it ends really badly. We have proof of that. That's why Gen X thinks the way they do. We also went to the moon, which a lot of people in Gen X don't think is real, but we'll get back to that some other time. I don't know, I don't really share that, but it's common. We also see with the Watergate scandal in 1972, Generation X is the first generation that switches political parties. We want to know, do you represent what I think? Do you represent my interests? Before that, it was a team. It didn't really matter what they represented. That was your team, and you voted for your team. We are the first generation to say, no. I want to make sure that you represent what I have to say. And then in 1973, we had two major things, oil embargo and Roe v. Wade. I am not here to debate Roe v. Wade. However, I will say, here are the facts. Very, very early in Gen X, Roe v. Wade comes along, and you have an entire generation of women who are raised under circumstances where they have complete control of their bodies. And that makes a big impression on that generation. And subsequent generations also have that. That's why it's such a big, hotly debated issue these days. Those of us that were born into it are like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? This is a birthright. This is what we do. We get to have control over ourselves. Then we have the Nuclear Proliferation Act in 1977. We thought we were making great progress there, but no. The Cold War is in full swing here. And then we have additional things to be afraid of. The world is getting more and more dangerous with the Iran hostage crisis in '79. Family structure, women at work, Gen X. We are the latchkey kids. Very, very high divorce rates, smaller families. Families have been moving for a generation and a half-ish. One of the reasons is proliferation of military bases and the GI Bill. And the second is that in 1956, a generation and a half-ish ago, they started building interstates, and it became a lot easier to move around. So families aren't quite as big. You don't live close to them. You have to travel to go and see them. And a very high divorce rate with single parents. Latchkey kids, Gen X, in thousands and thousands by far, came home to empty houses and a list of things to do, and do your homework and get the dishes done. We're very responsible, very autonomous, very independent. Lots of opportunities for women, but very high employment. And because of that, we saw our parents being laid off. We don't believe in pensions. We also don't believe in going to work for a company and staying there forever because they're not going to take care of you like you used to. How do you think this shows up at work? I'll do my homework. Geez, don't check on me again. How do you think it shows up with baby boomers that are like, we're going to go for a cause? You're like, oh my God. And this is the kind of interaction that takes place. Before I move on to the millennials, I just want to say that with Gen X, we are the first generation where we grew up with watching our parents investing. We are the first generation that had access and thought it was totally normal, and as it should be, for parents to have access to the markets. And this is my only plug today. But Charles Schwab was the first company to make that possible. I'm done. I'm done. Yes, breaking down barriers. The baby boomers didn't see that. Our mothers and our grandmothers didn't see that. What happened when Gen X goes off, we're getting married, we're going to college? A lot of our silent generation mothers got divorced. They were never going to get divorced, and now they're in their 60s, and they've never handled anything other than the grocery budget because that's a man's job. And why would they know any different? They were buying savings bonds and going to the bank. They weren't investing. They had none of that until later. Their example was you didn't do that. Our example was you didn't do that. Gen X is the first generation to have access to that from start to finish. So how many of you know someone who has had an issue where they became a widow or they got divorced and they had given up all control of their finances? We all know this woman, right? It's not their fault. They didn't know. They had no example. This is a relatively new thing, so we got to give them a break. Millennials. Oh, I love the millennials. Let's see, millennials, I know there's so many of you. Yay! Do you know why there's so many? Because this is the biggest part of the workforce. Millennials were raised by the baby boomers who had projects and they had change, and we're going to get activism, we're going to get out there. Well, guess what happened when the 60s ended? They had babies, and their babies became their project. Yes. This was, everybody gets a trophy. Baby boomers were very involved in the millennials' lives, very involved. They are their best friends. They talk about, how do you think that shows up at work? They go to their Gen X boss. Could I get your input and some feedback on this? And their Gen X boss is like, oh my God, you're so needy. I can't take it. It's because that's how they were raised. Lots of collaboration, lots of input. It's a great thing and it works well. You know who else it works well with? The boomers, because that's who raised them. They totally get you. It's me that's the total wacko, right? So I'm going to move through these pretty quickly because we're running out of time. These are significant events for Gen X, formative events for the millennials, high employment when they're really, really young, rising terrorism overseas, rising terrorism domestically. The world is a dangerous place. Family structures are smaller, lots of different technology-focused cultural influences. Both parents work. Very common to have mothers in executive positions. And equality is an expectation, not something that's nice to have. Yes! Ladies, we made it! And it's because of the millennials. I love it. I'm going to move through Gen Z because we have no idea what's happening with them. They are just entering the workforce. These are my children. And God bless them. The thing that I love about Gen Z is that they have more diversity and inclusion and understanding and celebrate the differences with people. But the world is a very dangerous place. Millennials and Gen Z are the first generations to grow up with an expectation that it's totally normal to be shot in school. And I would argue it's common, but it is not normal. And a great deal of them were born into a world where we had an African-American president. This is an awesome generation. I cannot wait to see what happens with them. I love to describe the generations this way. Baby boomers are like, not the 60s, the 60s. Oh, not like it was in the 60s, and now they're in their 60s. And Gen X, like we complained about the boomers because they tried so hard at everything, and it just looks like a lot of work. And then we wore flannel for a while, and now we complain about the millennials being super needy. And the millennials from like 2006, we had no iPhone. Oh my God, we had an iPhone. We had a new iPhone. We had a new one. We had an even bigger one. And then we had a new one. And then we had Fortnite on our iPhone. Oh my God. And then we had a new iPhone. That's how I was a little lightheaded. So what do we do with all this? How do we connect? How do we leverage our differences? Let's just review really quickly. Baby boomers, meeting style, face-to-face. Connect with them on the phone. Great for teamwork. Great for recognition. Great for change, great for loyalty. Gen X, maybe we should just avoid them altogether. But we like independence. Don't leave us voicemails. Geez, we hate that. And millennials, meet by Webex. You're welcome. You're welcome. Got to know your audience. Connect with them by text, mobile, IM. They love to collaborate. Their teamwork, change, tech-centric. I remember I told you the generation gap? Guess who? Guess who's the generation gap? That would be me. Because they love each other. All right, specifically for my boomers in the audience, a couple of things you can do for wealth. Number one, create an estate plan. It sounds like a root canal, but it's not. Be realistic and take action. You can do this. You love to take action. You love a challenge. Know your retirement benefit options and understand the difference between investing in your retirement versus investing in college. When you work with millennials and you approach them, be tech flexible and understand your need for face-to-face meetings. Coach and develop them. You're good at it and they love it. Minimize grunt work. Boomers, Gen X, millennials are the first generation to have paid internships, and they know how to do stuff, even when they're brand new. My generation didn't know that. We could answer phones, and that was it. If you want to indulge a millennial, give them some team projects. They love that. And if you really want to challenge them, give them something to develop them to understand how to do something by themselves, 100% by themselves. That's hard, but it's a good development opportunity. For Gen X, be direct. We hate fluff. Oh, just tell me what you need, for God's sake. Challenge your Gen X folks to coach and develop their younger employees because it's hard for them, but it's good for them. Reduce your corporate jargon and don't micromanage. For my Gen X folks, oh, there's so many suggestions. Number one, you need a financial plan. You need one that has a scenario for Social Security and one that has a scenario with no Social Security. Very important. Pay your retirement first, then talk about saving for college. Explore your insurance options now at this stage in your life because 5 to 10 years from now, they'll be too expensive or non-existent. Those are the things Gen X needs to do. When you work with millennials, increase your WebEx, IM, and TextCom. That's awesome because it's easy. We love easy. That's Gen X. Be involved, coach and develop them. That's going to be hard for us as workers. I think they need so much attention. Indulge them in team projects, challenge them with 100% solo objects, and give them feedback, recognition, and a career path even more than you are comfortable with because that's what they need and they expect and they deserve. Boomers. When you work with boomers, ask them more questions. They know a lot of stuff. Pair them with millennials and just let them go because they will make it happen. Indulge them in face-to-face meetings, and face-to-face means face-to-face, not on WebEx because that's their thing. Help them create change, allow them to create change, and leverage them for their optimism. Millennials, all right, this is most of you guys. Wealth. Be financially flexible and make a financially flexible plan. Life doesn't always work out the way you think. You'll be less disappointed if your financial plan is flexible. Protect your identity. We all need to do that, but especially the millennials because there's way more information out there about all of you than there ever will be about me or any of the boomers. So we need to do that too, but you all need to do that even more. Seek expertise and avoid any social input on your finances. It's like taking somebody else's prescription. Your friends don't know what's the most appropriate thing for you financially. Understand debt and credit and maximize your retirement contributions now. When you work with Gen X, ask us for feedback because we're probably not going to give it to you unless you ask. Be very clear about your needs. We will indulge them if we know what they are, but you have to tell us. Indulge them in being flexible. Don't always make them come in. If you really want to play a mean joke on a Gen X person, we have a fun thing at work to do. Tell them to be the cheerleader for the crowd. We will hate you for that, but it's a lot of fun to watch. Be really clear and concise as well. And when you're working with baby boomers, again, ask them more questions, partner with them. You guys are going to have a great time together. Indulge them in face-to-face. Again, remember, baby boomers like face-to-face. Maybe leave them a voicemail just to, go over the top every once in a while. And work with them to create change and leverage their optimism. I'm not going to go through all these because these are really basic things about financial wellness. You've all seen these in Time magazine. Nothing is different here. But the difference is, what is financial wellness, right? That's a big buzzword that we hear a lot about today. I have a colleague who specializes in financial wellness, and she describes it, and these are her words, as an equilibrium between savings, investing, and debt. And that is a specific experience for all of you. Find your own balance. And then some last words of wisdom: know the facts, know where your accounts are, know how they are titled. Are they going to do the things that you think they're going to do? They might not. Understand who has access to them. I've seen more women come in saying, my husband had a stroke and he's in a facility and I need to get money out of the IRA, and she does not have permission and I can do nothing for her. Make sure you understand who has access to your accounts and whose accounts you have access to and what you're trying to prepare for. If you'd like some resources on who you can trust from a financial professional, there are some very good ones that are accurate. Social media is not a good barometer for that. Come and ask me afterwards. I'm happy to provide you with some resources there. And very lastly, for your parents and for my boomers that are here or in the audience, know what your Medicare costs will be. This is the #1 detriment that will absolutely tank your retirement. Medicare is not free. Oh my God. I know. It's not free. There's a lot of people who think it is. Just be prepared to know the facts. You all have been an amazing audience. Do we have any time for questions? Yes, okay. We have a few minutes for questions. And I know we have a moderator online as well. And we have some microphones set up here so that the folks online can hear the questions.
Yeah, so if you have a question, please come up to this microphone so the people online can hear you.
The first question is, what is wrong with Gen X?
What do you mean we are awesome?
We are awesome, but nobody else thinks we are. Okay, yes, ma'am.
All right, so I'm a millennial, and yeah. So I know a lot of millennials experience college as being very, very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm already thinking like, okay, 529 plan, start putting money in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even have any kids. I won't have kids for like 5 years.
Oh,
I'm
you're
already
my
thinking
favorite
about
person in
it,
the whole world.
which is awful. But I know retirement, you said, is like #1 because you can't pull out loans. But at the same time, just imagining how expensive college is going to be in 20 years from now. Is there a balance there for my generation to start investing in?
Yeah, you're doing it the right way. You're starting really, really early. Most people that run into the trap of not being able to fund both or funding most of the college and then having to work 10 years longer are not starting, God bless you, when you're your age. So they end up starting late, and that's why they have to make choices and trade-offs. But good for you, starting so early. That is awesome. A+. A+. And college will probably get more expensive. I did see an article just recently that's saying that there's a huge demand for trades in the U.S. And I have 2 little boys, and I'm thinking Reback and Sons plumbing, and then I don't have to pay for college. I can have an amazing retirement. They own a business. Everybody's going to need plumbing, so I'm making excuses at this point. Yeah, it will be tough. It never gets easy, but it's more expensive from a dollar perspective. From a percentage, I'm not 100% sure, because when we just look at inflation and value of the dollar, it was very expensive for our parents to send us to school. I went to UC Davis, and I remember my very first bill for tuition was $320 for the quarter, and we thought it was highway robbery. And I did not have a pet dinosaur. It wasn't that long ago. So times change, but good for you.
So I guess try to max out your 401k if you can, but if you
try and max your 401k if you can. What you have working in your favor for both is the power of time. That's more important than anything you ever might choose to invest in. So power of time and compounding interest is what you've got working for you. Good for you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So I have difficulty when trying to figure out what to look for as I seek out a financial advisor. If you could provide some tips on what are some of the key things to focus on as we search for someone who can help us understand what to do with it.
Sure, great. That is a great question, and it's something that is hard for a lot of people to understand or really get a feel for. Sit down, do a little bit of research, and sit down and understand what's important to you. And it's not just what the result is, but how are you going to feel along that experience, right? One of the difficult things is right now is there's a ton of financial advisors that have been with people for a really long time. We're going to see a lot of them retire. But a lot of them don't have experience in working with women and understanding that. So they'll just tell you what to do. And you go, God forbid you're a Gen X woman. They're like, geez, wrong person. So make sure you understand what your values are and do a little bit of research. Recommendations are a great thing, and then come and talk to me later. I'll give you some resources to check what their track record is. Right?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is for people who have partners.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I hear this from my own friends, and I kind of did it in my marriage, which did not work out. Both. Is it okay for just one partner to assume the responsibility for all financial things like paying the bills, investments, and tax, while the other one, there's a justification for it. The justification is, well, I'm doing these things and my partner is taking care of the financials. Yeah. What happened with me, what I found later on is that when my marriage didn't work out, is that I had no clue about my own assets and what I was doing, and I had to ask for my passwords and stuff. So in my experience, I wish somebody warned me at the beginning when I was a young person, saying, you got to be responsible for your own things. You don't have to. What are your thoughts around that? Maybe it's okay.
Well, here's the thing. Number one, it's not your fault. You didn't have those examples. Why would you possibly think you'd need to be involved in those things? It's not what your mothers did. None of your mother's friends did that. You had no examples that might indicate that. And it's also, there's a lot of roles in relationships that this is what the men do and this is what the women do. We're not that far away from their conscripted roles, right? It takes people a long time to evolve behavior. It wasn't that long ago when Lucy and Ethel were the perfect wives. I mean, they'd get into misadventures during the day, but they were supposed to be the nice little wives. It wasn't that long ago. And we still fall into some of those patterns, right? I have 2 little boys. When they fall down and skin their knee when they were little, my husband is a godsend. He is a saint. He is a stay-at-home dad. Yes, ladies, we've arrived, and he's amazing. But when the boys fall down when they were little and they skin their knee, who did they cry out for? They cried out for mama. There are certain roles that we still play in relationships that kind of harken back to that time, and there's nothing wrong with that. It takes a long time for people to change their behavior. It's okay because no one told you any different, and why? You had nothing that would indicate that there should be something else happening. And it's also very common. You're not alone. You're not alone. However, now that you know that it is possible, there are some things you can do to take some steps to be a little more in control. Now, all of you are engineers, and I'm going to get way out over my skis here, and I'm going to say, would you build a system that had a single point of failure? Sounds so smart right now. See how I did that? So smart. Would you do that? Would you build a system that had a single point of failure? No. So in your financial lives, don't create a single point of failure. Even if it's unwilling, that didn't happen overnight, Circle. It happened over time, right? God forbid something happens to my husband, I will never take the garbage out, ever. I have to hire out for that. I mean, well, we do this. It's normal. It's natural. Do not feel bad about it. It's not your fault. But now you know what to do. There are some things you can do. You don't have to know how to invest. You don't have to know how to trade stocks. If you want to, great. It's there. You have the access. You have the education. I can give you lots of names of people that are smart about that can help you. However, you don't have to. If you just know where things are, what your access is, know the facts, that will take you a long way in your journey. Thank you for bringing that up. It's a really important point. You have one on the phones, and if this is my mother or my husband, I'm totally going to know, so don't try and play any jokes.
Testing. We do have one question from WebEx, but I just wanted to let you know we have over 105 participants on the WebEx call right now.
Yay! That's awesome. Thank you.
The question is, do you recommend a 4-year college visa versus the returns on the same?
4-year college visa.
Versus
Oh. Okay, can you repeat the question?
Do you recommend a 4-year college versus the returns on the same?
Oh, good Lord. Woo, that's a loaded question. There's no, am I correct in understanding that they're saying invest in college or invest it in the markets? Wow, yeah, no, I have no idea. There's so many different things that would, no, I have no idea. Way above my pay grade. Way above my pay grade. Interesting question, but maybe I could ask Chuck that question and he could, maybe he could come and give an answer to that. Wow, no, that's big. I will tell you my personal opinion. I have no technical opinion on this, but I will say from a experience and the things that you will get out of a college education, no matter what you decide to do after you have it, the experience and the opportunities that you buy with your tuition are priceless. And yes, it's going up and up and up. There are lots of creative ways to pay for that. Wow, putting it in the market, I can't even start. So education is priceless. It is something that you should invest in. Just be careful about it and do it over time. That's the best answer I can give.
Most of us here didn't grow up in the U.S. We have different formative years. Do you see a difference between people here and people from Asia, Europe?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I said at the beginning that not everybody grew up here. So it might not reflect your own families or your own growing up experience, but you can see it in your coworkers for sure. And it makes you think, right? What were your own generations? What were your own influences? How did it change over time? I mean, I find in my experiences in my relationship with work with people that didn't grow up in the United States, they come from families that are very traditional. Women and men played very traditional roles. Even if the women worked, they still came home. There was a great commercial in 1979. All right, Gen X, where are you? Where are you? Great commercial in 1979 for Anjali. Do you remember Anjali? It was Anjali. She remembers Anjali. And it showed this woman, and she had the baby and the groceries, and she's coming to the door. And then it showed you, and so the screen comes down, and it shows her, and she's got her power suit on, and her briefcase, and she's walking to work. This is something nobody had ever seen before. And then you see her, she's coming back home, and she's got a frying pan. And the music in the background says, I can bring home the bacon, I can fry it up in a pan, and never, never let you forget you're a man. And then all of a sudden she turns and she has this sequin gown on, and the Gen X girls were like, oh my God. Oh my God. I will tell you that I have never worn a sequin gown like ever when I come home, not once ever. But we had those experiences too, right? Even when we were working, we still had traditional roles that we had to come home to. We still did. And to some degree, we still do, right?
We have another question on WebEx.
Yes.
When and how do we train our children to start planning for finances? I have an 8-year-old twins, and I am contemplating starting a weekly money allowance.
Oh.
What other ways might I start teaching my children how to handle finances?
Oh, gosh. You can never start too early. These are things that we need to teach our children that our parents probably didn't teach us. And there's lots and lots of resources online. And I know that I said earlier this would be my only plug, but I'm going to do one more really quickly. There are great resources for small children online if you search for a program called Money Matters, and it's done by Schwab. If you have children in schools that you would like to have someone from Schwab come in and teach some of these classes, they are excellent about budgeting, about understanding debt and credit, which is one of the biggest things young adults fall into is the credit card. I did that too. Took me a long time to dig out. Shoes are amazing. What can I say? But it's never too early. Lots and lots of resources online. My favorite, of course, is the ones offered by Charles Schwab. Money Matters. It's a great program.
First of all, I want to thank you for you're a great speaker, and I'm sure you've inspired many of us. I'm one of the Gen Xers, and along the lines of what Sherpa Laws and Sherpa, thanks again for organizing this event every month. My question is, like Sherpa, I have every intention of knowing where my finances are. I try to do that, and then I sit back and get out of the mode. So it's my husband who handles all the finances. Are there any habits or any small steps that you recommend that we take on an ongoing basis so that we don't kind of fall out of it and try to come back in? Because it's also frustrating for the other person, okay, I told you all the passwords last month. What happened? Or 2 months back or 6 months back, and you know.
Yeah.
So
I get it.
Are there any recommendations?
And we're Gen X, so we're kind of like, why can't we be bothered? I don't really want to do it, right? I mean, it's part of our thing. Yeah, no, you're not alone. This is very, very common, especially in relationships. One thing I could suggest is most people have some kind of a calendar that you work on, right? There's always taxes. You can always use that. I mean, at least it's one reason you can look forward to taxes, is you've got your stuff out and you're working on it. Maybe put something on the calendar way ahead of time so that you can get together and work on those things. Maybe you go to the tax advisor meetings if you hire someone to do it. If you have a financial advisor, at least go once a year. Even if you don't like it, go once a year so you understand where things are. And when you're having that time together, everybody should have a resource where you know you can keep it online, or you can I mean, I would say keep it in hard copy, which I know is old school, and you guys are thinking, oh my gosh, old. No. If you have it online, then they have to know your password, and you're going to change your password too many times for them to get it. So people that need access to be able to take care of you if something should happen, having it in hard copy, hidden away, or locked where they then have a key or the combination to the safe is probably the safest way to go. But update that once a year.
I have one suggestion based on my experience. Make one thing your own. Like, you don't have to take over all the finances. Nope. Say you're responsible for taxes from now on, and let your husband be hands-off. Struggle a little. You learn very quickly. Yeah. Or, paying for something specific. It's your job, so you have to keep track of it when it's due, how you're going to pay it, online or check. So that's kind of how I do with my kids. They have one responsibility, and it's their own. They struggle.
Great idea.
They come crying.
Yeah, life is hard. Can I add to that? Yeah, of course. I think in order for the folks online, you have to have a microphone.
Hi, I'm Alka. So I'm part of the security team. So just to add to that, if you keep the same password all the time, it's gonna be a problem for you. So you have to keep changing passwords of all the 20 accounts that you have, right? And if you keep changing, if you have a hard copy, it's gonna be a problem. So the idea of having a cadence, maybe once a month or every other month, sit with your husband like I do and go over all your finances, like spend an hour in the night, maybe in your bed before.
Some hot money going on over here.
I mean, that's what I do. And you run the show. So you go over all the accounts, let him have the computer in his hand, but you go over your spreadsheet. Okay, what's the password? Oh, it's been 2 months since I changed the password of this account.
Thanks, Alka. We have just a few minutes left. I'm going to let them, thank you for that advice. I'm going to let them quickly ask.
Great suggestion.
It's not quick, but we're a young country compared to so many others, and yet we seem so far behind. And I look at the women in the advances we make, and yet I look in the political environment, women leading in business, and yet we're allowing our leaders in the government, we're not. Why? Why are we able to do it in the workforce and we're doing it in our homes, but we're allowing government to run away and leave us behind?
That may not be a question we can answer right now.
Yeah, it's a great question, but that's a whole different movie. Yeah, but great question. Great question.
We do have one last question from the WebEx.
Okay.
What are the creative ways to pay for college? Can you point us in the right direction?
Creative ways to pay for college. I would say scholarships. Well, here's why I say that though. When I was a kid, you had there was a book in your and again, I was like walking my pet stegosaurus, but we had a book in the college counselor's office, and you could go through all the organizations that had scholarships. Now you just go online, and there's thousands of them. Get your kids involved in those things so you can help supplement that way. I would say a mix between helping them, scholarships, and some debt. Some debt is okay. Healthy debt. It's usually really, really low interest rates. It's not going to get you in trouble.
Okay. Last two questions, very quick, if they are quick.
So this is kind of going off of the question that was asked in WebEx about teaching your kids financial responsibility from a young age.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know your take, and this is probably like everyone's personal preference, but I wanted to know your take on how much should kids typically be exposed to the actual finances of like their parents' situation, like other than just giving them an allowance or teaching them to invest. Like I kind of wonder what everyone's take is on like how much should they know about your finances so that they know like real world situations of what could happen.
Right. I would be as transparent with your kids as you're comfortable with, so they can be comfortable with whatever their possibilities are. You know, our parents didn't talk to us about finances because of that Great Depression, right? When I was a kid and I would ask my dad, love you, Dad, but when I would ask him, you know, are we okay? Like when you start worrying about those things. And I said, do you make enough money for us to do this? And he'd go, I make a couple of bucks. But it still like made me, you know, you worry about those things as a kid. I don't know why, but you do. And I see it in my kids as well. What I would say as far as transparency is I gave up. I mean, my kids can hack my account and Google everything. I mean, I know my 12-year-old, almost 12-year-old is sitting online right now laughing hysterically, like, yeah, I totally transferred money today. I mean, they can look it all up. They have all the information, and it's just native to them to look it up. So try as you might, they're going to know anyway.
Question.
Hi, I have a question about retirement planning. So I went to a financial advisor a couple of times, and all they start with how much money you're gonna need in retirement. I understand that help maxing out your 401k if you can, everything is there, but they ask us that when you're gonna retire, how long you're gonna need the money for, how much money you should be saving in the retirement. So those are difficult questions, and I have no idea how long I'm gonna live or when I'm gonna retire.
If you were in the 60s, you were going to live forever. So, I mean,
is there a tool or something which I can refer to or any help? Because this is a black box and I don't know how to enter or break in.
Yeah, I know, I get it. And that is one of the hardest things is to plan long enough, right? And surely if you plan for a certain amount of time, you're going to live 20 years longer, and that's going to be bad. So you're going to wish that you hadn't. You know, one of the best barometers, honestly, for that is to look at your own family. Do you have a lot of longevity in your family? Look at your own DNA. There are averages, but I think the average in the U.S. is like 76, and people in my family live to be like 100. So, and my husband's too. So, I mean, he and I are planning for a long time. We're going to be around to torture each other forever. So look at your own DNA and your own family, and then decide, okay, what are the possibilities here? How long do I need to save for? If you have lots of people that live really long, then you might have to work longer.
Sure, but the number differ, right? The amount of money you need for retire right now versus the amount of money you need to retire whatever, like 40, 50 years later. How do I get that money?
Most of the calculators that you'll see online will adjust for expected inflation. So the dollars that it's showing you today, it'll show you this really big number, and you go, oh my gosh. But then you see what it is in today's dollars, and it doesn't seem that strange. But it is one of the detriments of retirement is as you go along, if you don't invest it and get growth, the market will take care of that, and inflation will eat it.
Okay, we are really out of time now, but
great.
thank you so much, Amy. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody online.
Thanks,
You've been
everyone.
a great
So
crowd.
good.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, you got to have a little fun.
Great fun presentation.